Welcome to Swolehammer. So, with the Fury of the Deep rules being included in this month's White Dwarf, Riley and I thought it'd be a good idea to go over the Warcry rules that were included for both the Fyreslayers and Deepkin.
So first up, we have the Akhelian Thrallmaster for the Idoneth Deepkin from the Fury of the Deep box. So looking at it on its face, it's, pretty average speed, 5 speed. That's pretty typical for the Deepkin. 3 toughness, also pretty typical. 18 wounds is decent for 160. It's a little on the low side, but not punishingly so. 2 range is always nice because you can abuse, range against 1-inch range enemies. They have to move and attack rather than double attack into you, where you can double attack at 2 inches away.
Yeah, there's a possibility that you can run into combat and get away with it as opposed to getting punished for a double attack on the next turn or activation.
Yeah. And all in all, the new leader ability that's been added in, I think overall I like it. It's a little specific with needing 2 specific rune marks for allies within 6 inches for the buff. I think that's a little wonky considering the fact that Fyreslayers have the same ability as a triple.
Also, with the focus on using Namartis, if you want to go eels, this guy also obviously doesn't synergize with you. So that's always kind of like a downside, but that's kind of how they wanted to design it for Warcry, because that's how he functions in Age of Sigmar.
So with the limitation on your allies having certain rune marks to be able to capitalize on that buff within 6 inches, it's worth noting that the Auric Runefather and the Rune Sun get the same ability on a double for all Fyreslayers within 6 inches. So it's a little weird that it's more limited and it's more expensive. Just something to keep in mind. Here we have a sample list that we both kind of put together. So the leader that we picked is obviously the Akhelian Thrallmaster. We wanted to make a list for each of the 2 factions that show off the leader and how you can kind of get the most value out of it. So paired with the Thrallmaster is the Asharian Soulrender, which has a unique double that kind of lets you lock out an opponent from being able to move or disengage during that turn. You can pick a specific model and do that for, I believe it's a double, which is pretty cool because you can kind of control movement. It's a pretty powerful effect. As far as the fighters go, you're kind of just looking for bodies here to be in range of kind of that 6-inch range buff. This is kind of a buff party beatdown list. So we have 6 of the Namarti Thralls. Their stats are okay. Nothing too much to write home about. However, they do have 4 attacks at 2/4 damage profile.
Yeah, and when the buffs kind of start getting kicked in with the Thrallmaster, the Namarti Thralls go from kind of mopey to actually pretty threatening.
Finally, we added 2 Namarti Reavers just to kind of close out that point gap here. They're nothing also to write home about, but they have a range attack, which is valuable enough. And they also have a melee attack that they can use, which does take advantage of.
Yeah, as I realized, or as we realized with this list, we could have gotten to the 1,000 points probably on the dot because the Reavers cost 10 points more. But I think focusing into the Thralls and their damage potential with this Thrallmaster was kind of the intent.
Yeah, moving from a 3 strength on the melee attacks up, it really just helps you land those dice, and I think you can kind of, there's a lot of burst potential here when you kind of get things grouped together.
Now we're going on to the Fyreslayers specific model, which is the Auric Flamekeeper. A kind of mopey stat line, 3-inch move, which is kind of standard for Fyreslayers, unfortunately. 4 strength, 4 attacks are obviously good. The 1/4 profile is fine, 3 attacks. Nothing to write home about. What we're really going here for is the double. Ipping a double is also very important. The Master Flame Ruin. So I know there's a caveat to this. Most of the abilities that have caveats similar are like, oh, when a fighter's taken down, or when a fighter that you took down. Except this is when one of your friendly fighters got taken down. He functions the same way in Age of Sigmar, but in this case, in Warcry, it's actually a pretty realistic and achievable goal every round. You don't want guys to go down, but inevitably they will. And you can definitely benefit from an ability like this.
Yeah, it's a nice little comeback mechanic when something goes down to just be able to say, okay, well, all of my buddies within 6 inches deal 1 more damage on every hit and every crit. Like, it doesn't sound like 1 damage would be a lot, But if you have all of your friends partied up and within that 6 inches, that's a lot of dice that you're throwing at your opponent. 4 strength isn't bad, and that's pretty standard across the army, so some of those dice are going to be landing, so I think that 1 damage is going to start to add up.
Yeah, especially with Fyreslayers being 4 strength, 4 toughness pretty much across the board. It's one of those things that when someone chews through one of your guys, they'll probably have taken some damage, and then you can just swing back immediately.
Here we have another sample list, this time for the Fyreslayers. We ended up making the Grimwrath Berserker the leader unit instead of the Auric Flamekeeper, who's just there as a hero. The reason for this is because a lot of victory paths from the Tome of Champions 2021-22 involves taking down your opponent's leader, or in some way
Benefiting from it.
Yeah. So we kind of picked the bulkier boy here to be the leader unit, just to give your opponent a little bit of a harder time. The Grimwrath Berserker is also good because he can take a beating much better than the Auric Flamekeeper, and he also has a quad that's really, honestly, pretty nuts. It's very similar to Rampage, so you get a bonus move, then a bonus attack action. However, your bonus move gets to add the value of this ability to that distance for any move actions until the end of the activation. And so that 3 movement, which sounds pretty mopey when you're kind of looking at these cards of the Fyreslayers, actually quickly becomes pretty impressive. And you can pair that with a double for Fyreslayers to kind of increase your mobility.
Yeah, and then the Auric Flamekeeper is obviously in this list because that was the whole point, but also because he is the hero, because he's more of a support role. Albeit his role is very important, and it being, like I said, a double, can happen every single turn if you're kind of on the backswing of things. Then for fighters, we have 4 times Hearthguard Berserkers with the Berserker Broadaxe. Berserker Broadaxe is just flat out better, in my opinion, than the Flame Strike Poleaxe. Then 3 times Volkite Berserkers with the pair of Fire Steel Hand Axes. Again, just the better option, totaling out at 975 out of 1,000 points.
Yeah, and honestly, having 9 models within a warband is pretty solid. I also, in general, think that the ranged units aren't really that necessary for the Fyreslayers and Warcry, just because they have that double that allows you to throw axes. The damage is pretty decent there. Fyreslayers have a double called Fire Steel Throwing Axe. It allows you to pick a target within 6 inches and roll 2d6. For every 4 to 5, you deal 1 damage to that target. For every 6, you deal 3. And so in general, you can kind of get your ranged value out of there. I think the best way to go is to kind of abuse your doubles for movement to get your Fyreslayers where they need to be, and then just throw axes on the way in to any enemies that are kind of trying to approach you. And I think that kind of covers that base pretty well. So overall, what do you think your take is? Let's start with the Deepkin with the Akhelian Thrallmaster.
I feel like the Thrallmaster is a pretty good unit. Fine stat block, decent ability. I wouldn't say he's a must-take, but I definitely think he's a useful addition to the army.
Yeah, I don't think he's necessary in everything, but honestly for me, I think I would take him in my first Deepkin list. I haven't played the Deepkin in Warcry before, but I think he would be a good starting point for me. The damage profile is just so strong. 4 strength, 4 attacks, 2/5 is pretty crazy, and the triple on top of that means that strength is only going up, so you're probably hitting 3 ups, which is, I don't know, it's pretty good to me.
Yeah, and then for the Flamekeeper, I would say he's definitely a must-take for the faction 100%, because in a faction that overall is fine, he is an extremely cheap model at 120 points, and is just such a good support pillar for your warband.
Yeah, he's splashable as heck. 120 points is nothing. You can throw him in any list, honestly. I don't know why you wouldn't take him. Yeah, so I think overall I really enjoy both of these additions to kind of like the Warcry playstyle of both of these factions. I can't wait to kind of put them on the board and try them out. That'll be something that I think we'll definitely dive into. I do want to point out, though, I have mentioned this to a couple of our friends. Take a look at the Deepkin in the bottom right and tell me that that's not Dave Bautista. I mean, that's Dave Bautista, right? Anyway. Stay swole. I guess I'm committing to saying that at the outro. God damn it.